products. I pulled up the foil mates for the Holly Jolly stamp set, and what we'll be doing is using each of the impressed images in order to stamp over them and then cut them out with the coordinating dies and also foiling them. These are toner sheets, so each of those black areas on these sheets are going to be perfect for picking up those stamped images and getting a little extra foil detail. Now, the Gina K stamp and foil line for ThermoWeb comes with three different products. It comes with the stamp set, it comes with the foil mate sheet, which is also the toner sheet, along with the coordinating die cuts. I'm using images from the stamp and foil Holly Jolly set to ink up with my Catherine Pooler ink. Right now, I am using her Samba ink. I'm stamping up my image and I'm stamping it on top of the stamp and foil sheet. This is going to allow me to get a nice solid color for my ornaments in that Samba color, but also to be able to pick up a different color to foil once it's run through my laminator. I'm going to go ahead, press down my stamp with an acrylic block once it's inked up, allow it to sit for a second or two, and then remove it. The Catherine Pooler inks are super juicy and they're really great to be used on these sheets. Next, I've grabbed the Rockin' Red and I'm using my poinsettia stamp. I'm inking it up and I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same process that I did for those ornaments. I've gone ahead, inked it up. I'm going to press it down, allow it to sit for a second or two with some good pressure. I will remove it and then reline it up with the second poinsettia, repeating my process of before. I really like using the Rockin' Red because it's a little bit darker than the Samba, but still plays with that red color family. And of course, red is perfect for a Christmas card. Next, what I'll be doing is going back to that Samba ink. And as you can see, there are some little petals that go with those poinsettias as well. So I've inked them up, lining them up right now, and then I'll be pressing down again to get a nice impressed image. When it comes to my crafting, I really enjoy working with similar color palettes. So what I'm doing is calling back to a color that I used before to allow my card to have some nice color combinations going on. So I am pressing that down, calling back to the Samba, and then that is it for those smaller petals. Next, I wanted to focus on the poinsettia seeds. I thought orange would be a really nice color, so I called on the Orange Twist Catherine Pooler ink. I'm stamping up my image, pressing it down to get a nice impression, and then I will re-ink again to get it onto my second poinsettia. I really like how these orange seeds look. Next, we're going to work on the final image, which is the holly leaves. I've got the Deck the Hall ink by Catherine Pooler Designs. I'm going to go ahead and line that up, stamp it down, hold for a couple seconds, about one or two, and then I'll remove my stamp block to reapply. I think that the Deck the Halls ink by Catherine Pooler Designs is absolutely perfect for this project as it totally calls on the theme that we're using. I'm really excited to be using this Deck the Halls ink to make this Christmas card come together and to really use these inks to make these foil mate sheets come to life. So I'm pressing down on my second image and I'm entirely done with those leaves. I'm also going to be using the berry image using the Rockin' Red ink by Catherine Pooler. So I'll be stamping these down, but I do want to let you guys know I actually will not be really showing these berries that much in my final project as they end up getting tucked behind my die cut. However, I thought that it would be nice to show a completed image for you all and to let you know how these berries really look all stamped up because I think it looks very nice. So I'm stamping down those berries with my Rockin' Red ink, the process from before, and once this is completed, my stamping of this card is all done. Now to move on to the die cutting of my foil mate images, I will be using the coordinating craft dies from the Stamp and Foil line. I will be using the die for the ornament, the die for the poinsettia flower, and the die for the holly and berry image as well. Like that these dies are rather affordable and they're not going to cost too much as there's only a couple images that are included, and I love that they exactly die cut the images from the foil mate sheets. So I'm lining them up. As I do have two sets of images, I will be needing to run this through my die cutting machine twice, and I am tacking down each of my dies with a little bit of pixie tape. This is a low tack tape also by ThermoWeb. It's one of their newer products and it really functions nicely. The texture almost feels like a washi tape and it has a nice low tackness that you can hold your die cuts as they're going through your die cutting machine. However, because of the low tack, even though it will hold your die cuts in place, it's not going to pull up on your paper causing any rips. It's really nice to make sure that when you're using tape to run through your die cutting machine that you are using a lower tack tape to avoid your pretty images from getting cut up or torn So I really do like using the pixie tape for that. So I'm going ahead, I'm using my Spellbinders Platinum die cutting machine, and I'm going to go ahead and run the image through that. Now I am showing you only one of the times that I ran these dies through my die cutting machine. I thought it would be a little repetitive to show it to you twice, but here I go. I'm running my first layer through my die cutting machine, cranking it through, and then it's going to be ready to go for my final project. Now for my project, I do have all of the images die cut and ready to go for a little bit of foiling. Right now I'm laying out the items. I have the poinsettias, the holly berry with leaves, and the ornaments as well. The first objects that I'm going to be foiling are the poinsettia leaves and the ornaments, and I'm going to be doing this with the Gina K Designs Fancy Foil in Radiant Red. One of the most important tips that I've learned while using toner sheets is to wipe off the toner sheet itself with a microfiber towel, just to make sure that you're removing any sort of residue from those toner sheets. That includes any sort of dust along with any sort of oil residue from your fingers as well. So as you can see, I'm trying very hard to not touch a lot of the different items that I have die cut out, as I don't want the oil from my fingertips messing up with any of those foil transfers. Now, I do have a piece of the Radiant Red Fancy Foil, and I'm also wiping off the back of this with my microfiber towel as well. So now what it's time to do is to get my items ready to go through my pocket. So I do have a piece of parchment paper with some cardstock that's just scrap cardstock from my stash. I'm laying down my images and I want to organize them in a way that they will be entirely covered by that strip of Radiant Red Fancy Foil. You are going to see me fidget a little bit with them, just as I want to make sure that they're all lined up properly and none of the images are going to be outside of the Radiant Red transfer foil. I'm also cleaning it up with my microfiber towel just to make sure that I'm not getting any of that residue on. I'm a little meticulous when I'm using my foils and toner sheets just because I want to make sure that my final product is going to turn out the way that I want it to. So as you can see, I am rearranging those images as promised, and I am placing my fancy foil with the color side up and into my sandwich. So this is my parchment paper sandwich. I'm getting it all ready to go, making sure that my parchment paper has no wrinkles and is laying flat. And I'm using my laminator for a heat transfer method to get it transferred onto the toner sheets. Of course, I am using a little bit of a speeded up motion so you can see this going through my laminator. And now what I'm going to go ahead and do is show you the peel reveal for these 4 items. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to peel off my toner sheet, and you're going to begin to see how that Radiant Red Fancy Foil transferred over to my images. I will bring them a little bit closer in a couple seconds just so you can see it. I am going ahead and cleaning up my workspace, of course, just so I have a clean space to work in. As I bring the ornament and the poinsettia flower closer to the camera, you'll be able to catch when the light hits it, that little bit of glimmer and shimmer from the foil transfer onto the toner sheets. I really like how this makes the project really pop, and those little details I think are really going to pay off in the long run. Now for the next portion of my foiling, I'm going to be using the glittering green fancy foil, also by Gina K Designs for ThermoWeb, to get that glittering green foil detail onto my little holly leaves. Like I said, this is also going to transfer onto the berries as well. We won't see that for the final card, but we will be getting that transfer. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is use a clean sheet of the glittering green fancy foil. I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to grab my die cuts just to kind of get an idea of how much space is needed for me to cut. I have a rotary trimmer on my cutting mat, and I am just going to use this to cut cleanly across my fancy foil sheet. I have found that using this rotary trimmer is a fantastic way to trim my foil sheets, as I can do just one pass through. I don't have to worry about any sort of obstructions that I get from my scissors, and it just really works well for me. So I'm going ahead right now, I'm getting my sandwich ready with my parchment paper and cardstock. What I'm going to go ahead and do is lay down those holly leaf images, and I'm going to wipe them off with my microfiber towel just so I can make sure that that there's no sort of oil residue, any sort of dust on there. I'm also going to be taking the back of that glittering green fancy foil and wiping that off with my microfiber towel as well. That's going to allow for any sort of minimalization and obstructions for my transfer. So I'm lining that up in my parchment paper sleeve, pressing it flat, and I'm going to go ahead and grab my heat laminator once again for a sped up run through of getting the heat transfer of the fancy foil onto my holly berry leaves. Now that the heat transfer of the foil is completed, I'm going to show you guys the peel reveal of these beautiful holly berry leaves with this glittering green fancy foil. So I'm pulling up my fancy foil and I'm revealing my leaves. You can't really see too much of the glitter yet, but I promise you will soon. So as I hold this up closer to the camera, you got to watch where it's going to hit the light and you're going to get a little bit of that transfer. I promise you're going to see a little bit more of this later as these are some finer details. So right now I'm going to go ahead and clean up my workspace to get ready for the next step of my project, which is with the Craft Candy Stripes toner card fronts. And I'm going to use that radiant red fancy foil once again, and I'm going to transfer that onto the background of my card. Using my rotary trimmer once again, I'm mapping out how much space I'm going to need when I place that craft toner card front on top of my card. So as you can see, I'm going ahead and I'm mapping out just how much space is needed. I've got my rotary trimmer. I'm going to do one pass through to trim up what's needed. It's very important to make sure that you're leaving a little bit more foil on each side of the card than the actual card front itself, just in case anything shifts while you're foiling. Exact measurements don't work so well when you're foiling just because of those shifts. So I've got my Craft Candy Stripes toner card front ready to go. I am also taking my microfiber towel and wiping off both the toner card front itself and the back side of the Radiant Red Fancy Foil as well. I'm taking my Radiant Red Fancy Foil and placing it directly on top of my toner card front, once again with the color side of the foil facing up towards me, and I'm getting ready to run it through my laminator once again. So I've got my laminator ready to go for a heat transferred method, of course sped up so you don't have to watch the whole process as it is a little bit longer for it to pass through. This is going to be the best peel reveal yet. As you can see, I'm beginning to peel away that radiant red fancy foil, and I've gotten a near perfect transfer onto my Craft Candy Stripes toner card front. I absolutely love how this turned out. You can really see how that red foil is captured in the light, and I love that the speckles from the radiant red are coming through. I just absolutely adore how this turned out, and I know that those red candy stripes are going to be perfect for a holiday project. For my sentiment, I'm going to be using the Pink and Main Christmas greeting word dies. This comes with Merry Christmas and season greeting options, both with an outline die, but I will be using the Merry Christmas die for this project. I am using the Black Velvet Flock transfer sheets for the background image of this die cut for the Merry Christmas. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is take a scrap piece of the Black Velvet Flock with that outline piece, line it up, and then put it into place with a little piece of pixie tape. Now, I am being careful with the pixie tape to make sure that none of this is getting inside my die cut, as flock transfer sheets are a little delicate and you don't want to pull up from inside of your image. Now I'm getting my die cutting machine ready to go and clearing off a little extra desk space just so I can make sure that I'm not going to accidentally disrupt any of the previous images or elements that I've already made for my card. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my sandwich and running it through my die cutting machine so I can get that Merry Christmas outline die in the Black Velvet Flock all ready to go. Of course, got to get that die cutting machine off my desk so I have enough space in order to work, and I'm going ahead and showing you right now just how nicely that die cut did work of that Black Velvet Flock. I absolutely love using flock in my projects because I don't think your recipient expects some fuzziness going on with their card. Using that Merry Christmas word die, I am going to die cut this 3 times from my white cardstock as I'm going to stack my image so I can get a nice thickness. Now, when I say stack, what that means is I'm going to be die cutting that word 3 times and then gluing each image on top of each other using a liquid adhesive. Now, I'm running this through my die cutting machine, so I'm going to only run this through once, even though I am die cutting this 3 times, as you guys will see shortly. Now I do have each of my die cut sentiments ready to go, and I'm going to walk you guys through how I do the stacking of my images. So starting with my first layer, I do grab a liquid adhesive. I am using my Ultra Bond permanent liquid adhesive. This is by Decofoil, and I really like that it's a dry clear adhesive that allows me to get a nice grip when I put it onto my projects. As you can see, my bottle is very well loved, probably ready for a refill sometime soon. I am using my Ultra Bond adhesive to get a nice sort of application to each part of my letters. As you will also see, I am using my pick tool to get a nice grip onto my project as well. This is going to allow minimal shifting as I am sort of applying into finer areas. Now I'm taking my second die cut and applying it directly on top of my first image. I'm using my fingers to move my die cut into place so there's not much that you can see from the bottom layer. I also used an acrylic block just to sort of put some pressure down and make sure everything is adhering. I will now work on applying my second layer to my third layer. So I'm using that Ultra Bond adhesive just to go ahead and get a nice application onto that Merry Christmas word die so it'll be nice and ready for the third die to go on top of it. I'm trying very careful to not get glue too messy and too much all over the place, just because I don't want glue all over my workspace and possibly getting too sticky that it's going to cause any issues with the flock outline piece as well. So I'm using my fingers to push everything into place, minimizing that overlap once again and making sure everything lines up as best as it possibly can. Now for the final part with this sentiment, as I push all of my sentiment into place, I will be getting it ready to adhere on top of my black velvet foil outline as well. So I'm using that Ultra Bond adhesive once again, holding it down with my finger this time, just as I was a little bit anxious to get this ready to go. And I'm going ahead, adding that Ultra Bond adhesive, and then what I will be doing is flipping it over using a pair of tweezers and getting it applied nice to my outline piece. I am using tweezers to try to minimize any sort of transfer of that liquid adhesive, and once I get it into place, I use my acrylic block just to add a little bit of pressure to make sure that it's right in place. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is begin to kind of map out where all of my die cut stamp and foil images are going. I want those holly berries to be on the end, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to adhere them directly on the back of my Merry Christmas word die. So I've gone ahead and I put it on the back. Next, I am going to be grabbing one of the ornaments to layer behind. I don't want it directly up and down. I want it a little bit off center. So I'm sort of playing around with the different angles that I can put it at. And I do want a little bit of that foil, of course, from the little handle on top and the decoration showing. Next, I'm going to be using part of the poinsettia, and I'm putting that into place and getting it nice and adhered down. Next, what I'm going to do is I want to kind of shift up the order so it's not the identical order that what's on top. So on the end, I'm getting ready to adhere down one of the ornaments as well. So I'm going ahead using my Ultra Bond adhesive, and I'm going to be placing my word die on top of it, just and having that off center to get a little bit of interest and angle as well. Next, I'm using my poinsettia plant, and I will be adhering that down using my Ultra Bond adhesive. And as I got that in place, the last item that I will have to put into place is that final holly berry leaf. As you will see, you can't really see those berries as I did promise all along, but they are there and foiled, and it'll be a really fun image for you to use for your holiday projects as well. Next, I'm taking 1/16 white foam tape from ThermoWeb, and I'm going ahead and trimming this down to make sure that each of the areas that needs a little extra support is getting those areas of foam tape as well. So I'm removing my backing, and this is going to be adhered as one solid unit to my toner card base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that down, and the bulk of my card is ready to go, but I always like finishing it with a little bit of embellishment as well. So I do have some rainbow glitter enamel dots by Pink and Main, and I'm going to be using the red and the green ones in order to get some extra embellishment onto my card. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in place. I like to use the rule of three when I place down my embellishments. So I have 3 clusters, and I like to vary the size and colors used as well. So I'm using in the first corner a large red, a medium green, and a small red. Then in the upper left corner, I'm using a large green. Then I'll be using a medium red and a small green. So it's a really nice variation of little embellishment clusters. And my project is entirely completed. did. Thank you guys so much for being here today and for joining us for our Card Maker Success Summit. I really hope that you enjoyed my tutorial on how to use foil and toner sheets to get the most out of your projects. Be certain to stay tuned for so many other creative talent that'll be showing you how to amp up your holiday cards, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Don't forget that you can follow me for more crafty inspiration on Instagram at Just a Note by Justin. And I really hope that you take a moment to check me out as I have a lot of fun holiday inspiration along with other crafty inspiration as well.